Well, we're glad everybody has joined us on the Leaders in Housing Counseling call for first one in December. And unbelievable that we are getting this far into the year already, but we are. And so appreciate everybody joining us. I think we're having a valuable call today. And I'll just dive into what the agenda is to get us started off. We're going to start off with legislative updates and the good work that Melody's been doing in the House and Senate, and some emerging issues there. We'll get an update on housing counseling certification, and Ellie will handle that and give us a good viewpoint of where things are at in the field. I'll do a couple quick updates on the lender fee for service payments. As we know, there have been changes that we were able to usher through along with others on RESPA, and there's been some really good work done by a broad coalition of housing counseling groups and intermediaries who to try to sharpen the definition of the services we provide. So we'll give you a quick update on that. I'm sure there'll be more in other calls as these mature. And then another update on our work on trying to create standard data fields in the technology field for housing counseling and using the MISMO standards. David Young isn't able to join us, but I'll pinch hit just to give people a quick update on where things are at. The bulk of the call is going to be on this, on the Chicago Affordable Housing Design Competition, Design Disruption, it's called, I think. And we had them on a year ago, so what's really nice is they're going to come back. When we had them a year ago, they were really talking about what the idea of it, and they were about to launch, and now they have not only launched but completed, and so we'll get to see the product of their work, and we have the winning entry represented as well. And part of this, I think, is an interesting opportunity for how to think about the affordable housing range. But I think what's also important is that this really positions a leading housing counseling group in the essential work that the city does around affordability, and that we think this is a model, these kind of competitions are a model that other cities could do to bring together the various elements of people in the housing world. And you'll get a sense of the broad reach of this, and that this is quite doable, and you might be able to customize this for your own city and really generate a lot of both good ideas and goodwill for affordable housing. So very interesting. We'll do a quick snapshot on the latest reminder that we still want those wonderful pictures of yours that we can post on Facebook, but also use to promote housing counseling. And our last pitch on NHRC membership. We've had a good year, as we always do, but there's been some more value created, and I think we are glad that groups are continuing to join and renew. Okay, with that note, let's turn over to Melody. So what's happening over in DC?
Thank you, Bruce. A lot has happened since our last call. I'll just dive right in on legislation that pertains to housing counseling. With the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Bill, which was sponsored by Representatives Green and Wagner, forgive me, it passed the House by a vote of 290 to 118. We're really excited about that. And while we were focusing on the Senate, we are now prioritizing the Senate. The bill has already been introduced there by Senator Schatz from Hawaii and Young, which has a lot of great reforms. We are still working closely with their offices and other Republican offices to see if we can include an amendment to include more specific housing counseling language in the legislation. We're also working really closely with the Banking Committee. We've heard that they're likely going to have a markup for legislation going forward, but Senate Banking Leadership Chairman Crapo would like more Republican support for the bill before introduction. We've heard from a few offices about joining as co-sponsors, but so far they've all been Democratic offices. So if you get an email from me asking if you would like to be on a conference call with your senator to talk about this bill, by all means, please volunteer. We would love to have your support in this. We recently had a very good call with North Carolina groups. Thank you, everyone who's on the call who participated in that. We had more than 12 groups that were represented on that call to talk to Senator Tillis's office. And while we didn't speak directly on disaster recovery in particular because a staffer had scheduling issues, it was still a great call to talk about the value of housing counseling in the state of North Carolina and the importance of additional funding in order for them to continue and expand operations. And calls like that are just really great for our work and really pushes the needle on why housing counselors are so essential for senators' constituents. There was a second community development block grant disaster recovery bill that was introduced by Senators Burr and Tillis, which prompted that call. However, that legislation is not what's supported by the field overall. And we're asking people, if you get any correspondence or emails about it, to move forward on advocating for the Schatz-Young bill, which does include the reforms that the field has worked very closely on for the last 2 years. And I'll send more information about that going forward. But again, we are working with both offices, Republican and Democratic senators alike, as well as the Senate Banking Committee, and we're hoping that we can move forward on the bill soon. Around the Housing Financial Literacy Act, this bill has not been introduced yet in the Senate. It passed the House. It is a bipartisan bill that was originally sponsored by Representatives Beatty and Stivers from Ohio. And what this bill does, as I said in previous call, is that it modifies the discount by FHA on single-family mortgage insurance premium payments for first-time homebuyers if they complete a financial management financial literacy program. It provides them a 25-point discount. So we really support this bill. We think it's a great incentive for first-time home buyers. Senator Peters, following the passage of the bill in the House, has taken the lead, and he would like to introduce the bill. However, he wants the bill to be bipartisan. As you can imagine, legislation has a hard time moving in the Senate if it does not have bipartisan support, now more than ever. Originally, we thought that Senator McSally from Arizona would be interested in being an original co-sponsor. We had a great conversation with her office and referred her to Senator Peters' staff. And after a month of conversations, deliberations between both offices, ultimately Senator Sally declined to be an original co-sponsor. So we are back to square one on the Senate version of the bill. We recently sent out an email prompt asking for calls with different senators, particularly Republican senators and senators that are on the Banking Committee, which is the committee of jurisdiction for that bill. And we're hoping that we can try and get an original co-sponsor. We still have a few leads. Senator Portman, Senator Scott. We had a really good conversation with Senator Harris's office yesterday. But ultimately, both bills, we're trying to build more support, particularly Republican support. So just keep an eye out for me if I ask any of you to join us in advocating for either of those bills. Appropriations, the topic everyone wants to talk about but not really think about. In our last call, there was a continued resolution to fund the federal government through November 20th, I believe. Obviously, Congress needed more time, so they passed a second continued resolution to fund the federal government through December 21st to allow themselves more time to complete the appropriations process. What we've heard is that so far, the conference committee has decided on a 302B allocation, which is the overall final number that they use when determining funding levels for each of the separate conference committees, which includes THUD, Transportation HUD Conference, which will have the Housing Counseling Program included under a list of programs to fund. But we don't have a final list on the members of each different conference subcommittee, if you will, and that includes the THUD conferees. When we do, we're going to do a hard push on advocacy just for these conferees. What we anticipate is that the THUD conferees will be those who are in the leadership positions, that's chairman and ranking member, in both the House and Senate Appropriations Committees. So in the House, that will be Representatives Nina Lowey from New York, and Representatives Kay Granger from Texas, the chair and ranking person for the House Appropriations. And then it will be the chair and ranking person for the subcommittee for House THUD, which will be Chairman Price from North Carolina and Ranking Member Diaz-Balart from Florida. In the Senate, same thing. So the chair and ranking member of Senate Appropriations is Chairman Shelby from Alabama and Leahy from Iowa. And then the chair and ranking member of the subcommittee, which will be Senator Collins from Maine and Senator Reed from Rhode Island. So if that's the final list, we've already had great relationships on the House side. We're still trying to work very closely on the Senate side and get more support around there. But if that's the final list, we'll be sending out a lot of correspondence to the field and asking them to send emails, call, letters, whatever we can do so that we can try to move the final number in conference to the House number, which passed the House at 60 million. As I said in previous calls, right now the Senate voted for 45 million, which is just, no one saw that number coming. It was much lower than anyone in the field anticipated, and we're hoping that they will go with the $60 million number. So that's going to be our December. This may drag into January, just because both chambers are quite busy with the impeachment process. However, what we have learned from the last fiscal year 19 appropriations process, the shutdown that happened following that, no one really wants a shutdown, so they're all working very, very hard to avoid such an event, and we'll just keep everyone posted as we get more information. I think that's all for me.
Okay, so let's move on to HUD Housing Counseling Certification. Ellie, give us an update, please.
Thanks, Bruce. Hi, everybody. So as many of you may know, on a monthly basis, the HUD Office of Housing Counseling website updates the percentage of agencies that have HUD certified counselors. So as of December 1st, we are up to 36%. We're kind of really inching very slowly. Last month we were at 35%. So we really need to be moving forward more quickly. You can see also they provide the top 5 state agencies with 5 states that have agencies with HUD certified counselors, the states with 50% or more, and then the states with 20% or less, just to kind of give you an update of where everybody is at. So next slide. In an effort to really push forward on getting our housing counselors certified, these are some obstacles that we keep hearing about over and over again. Test anxiety is a big one, and counselors are afraid that they're going to lose their job if they fail, that they don't have enough time to focus on studying because they're so busy working with their large caseloads, and they don't feel able or allowed to set dedicated time for studying during their workday. Having to repeat the exam, it's $100 each time they have to take it. And in many small agencies that have tight budgets, they're only able to cover the cost of one test, and so then the counselor has to shoulder any costs coming after that. And then just some issues with memorizing some key terms and some dates, so just around rote memorization. Some tips that we just keep hearing about over and over again. There's many more, but these are ones that really just keep popping up. And first and foremost is executive directors and program managers giving their counselors the opportunity to study during work hours, and also providing a supportive environment. So, we got some feedback from a couple of organizations, and some feedback was how important it was that when they failed the exam and came back to work, the executives at their organization were very supportive and just said, hey, it's okay, try again. And that meant everything, and made those counselors feel much more comfortable with being able to go and take the test again and feel successful. So that's an important one. Also, we keep hearing I mean, this is repeated. I can't even tell you how many times we hear this. Take the exam within 2 weeks of going to training. And with that, go to your training, and before you go to your training, once you know the week or two that you're going to be in training, schedule your exam before you go to the training so that there's no coming back and trying to schedule it. Just get it scheduled so that when you come back from your training, you take the test. And then also getting support is important. And there are a few things that that we have found that people find to be very helpful. Subscribing to Housing Action Illinois Countdown to Certification emails. There is a HUD Housing Counselor Exam Prep Facebook group that people are finding really, really helpful. And then forming a study group with other counselors in your area. And just a very quick plug, I'll tell you, we are working on starting up another round of study buddies. So keep your eye out for that. That'll be happening hopefully before the end of the year, but if not, very early in January. And then finally, make sure that you check out the knowledge assessment tool that HUD is offering. It's different than the practice exam in that you find out what you answered incorrectly and what the correct answer is. It's a great study tool. Counselors that have passed the exam have talked about how helpful this knowledge assessment tool is. There are other tips and tricks, but these are the big ones. And the links that are here in this on this slide, the PowerPoint is available for you to download through the GoToMeeting, and you can then access those links. But if for some reason you have difficulty downloading the PowerPoint, just send me directly an email and I will get those links to you. And that's it.
Great. Thanks so much, Ellie. And certainly, if you have other innovative twists, please send them to Ellie. There's a whole group of people that are thinking about working on certification. We're going to try to do a big push next year to get more people over the line and expand the pool of available people to become housing counselors. So there's a lot more to come on this, but we do really appreciate what you've learned in the field, and that's been quite useful for us, helping to make the next strategic steps in all this. Other issues in the field that we're working on. So on lender fee for service payments, as we all know, we had a big breakthrough this year with the CFPB and the no action letter on RESPA, and it's cleared the way for lenders to submit their own no action letter request and not have to worry about making fee for service payments to housing counseling agencies. The regulatory path is much clearer. It basically uses the old HUD rules and the Housing Counselor Handbook. And so now we're moving into a deeper conversation around, well, what should the pricing be and what should it look like? We've had Matt Reby on the call a few months ago to talk a little bit about doing a better job of defining what the value proposition is when we provide housing counseling, and he has sort of led the charge on creating a much better definition, and has been working with the Coalition of HUD Intermediaries, with us and others, to develop a better format for defining what the pricing should look like, and now from there moving on to what a price range or value, what the cost might look like in some way, without having to set a definite fee structure, set up a way of at least defining a way of costing out what counseling might be done. So the nice thing about the value structure is that you can say the baseline things that HUD requires everybody to do would be the baseline housing counseling activities. So that's the reviewing people's income and debts, their credit report, their household income, setting the goals, all the things that are required in the manual. And then there's a second tier of activities which are kind of enhanced. So a lot of us do it already, but the idea is that is extra and could be paid for additionally on top of the baseline housing counseling activities. So this would be things like working extensively with people on their credit issues, putting together a full documented package to if somebody's applying for a mortgage to get them to be available, verifying their income, verifying their various parts of their package, identifying whether they're in a community reinvestment census tract, potentially running people through one of the automated underwriting systems, a variety of things that we would think of as additional add-ons to the regular thing, and that there might be a baseline fee and then a second to get the more enhanced activities. And also proposed maybe a third level as well, which is once the loan has been originated and if the counseling agency continues to work with the client to get them through to closing. And certainly it's been an experience of some of us that for lower income and more complicated deals, there's a challenge of getting, once the loan's been originated, to get them to actually to closing. And if there's if working with the underwriter, working with the loan processor to make sure that if there's a letter of explanation needed or expanded documentation, that you can get the client to understand it and to figure out what needs to be done and help handhold the deal to closing. So all of these are ways of defining what the value is, and then now some work will be done on what the costing is by this group of people. We'll keep you informed, and when there's a final product, we'll certainly invite some of the contributors to that onto the leaders call so you can get a better sense of it. And there'll be some work on engaging lenders and trying to get this to be more the standard of how our work is valued and priced. So hopefully this will be helpful to all in the field once it's complete. We're also working on, as you well know, on creating standard data fields for housing counseling in the in our world, so that if you have two different client management systems you have to use, you don't have to rekey the data. So that when you communicate, you might send something to a lender that you'll be using the same data fields that they are using, so that the information can flow through freely and doesn't need to be manipulated. That we can get. Currently, the system already exists to communicate with HUD and the 9902 data, but then other lenders, other funders might need requirements as well, and we're going to try to match with those as well. And as we've talked about in the past, there's the MISMO system, which Fannie, Freddie, the Mortgage Bankers Association, and all the major players have agreed to a set of digital standards. What Freddie Mac has now funded Housing Action Illinois to have a computer specialist, a data specialist, go through and look at the data standards that are in MISMO and figure out which ones are appropriate for housing counseling, and that can be the basis for our data standard fields. The advantage of using this rather than creating ours from scratch is that we could then intermesh with the rest of the housing counseling, rest of the housing industry, and it makes us a more seamless part of the system, and it would allow us to be more deeply integrated. Part of the process is to figure out what we need to use now and what's already in the system. We did a survey that we put out over the leaders list and a couple other lists out there. David Young circulated it among a number of people as well. And that survey results have been very helpful. Thank you, everybody who's done it. If you were planning on doing it, you should do it right away, because I think we're right on deadline. I think tomorrow may close, so please do it. And really all that is to figure out what we want to include on the list. It doesn't include everything, because the 9902 data fields we already know should be used. There are some things we already know, but we're trying to understand what else is being used in the field. This will be kind of a critical piece here, because as robust as we can make it, will mean that housing counseling agencies will have more options in our ability to communicate with lenders and share data. Part of the goal here is to figure out what's missing in MISMO that we need specific to housing counseling. NHRC is going to become a member of MISMO, and in that process, we will tackle becoming be part of a subcommittee specifically on housing counseling that will generate and define and integrate data fields that are specific to housing counseling that might not already be in MISMO. And this will kind of be a big leap forward in our work. So a lot of people putting their heads together. There'll be a technology convening the end of January, which will bring together the client management systems, Freddie and Fannie, HUD, to kind of put a final cap on this. HPN is, I guess, the sponsor of it. And hopefully that will move us forward in a way that brings the entire industry along. I do have to say, appreciate the cooperation that the client management system providers have shown and willingness to really get down and roll up your sleeves and get into the data here. So, you know, for your inner nerd, I hope this is resonating. We think it's going to be valuable for the future of housing counseling. Good. Well, with that note, let's move on to disruptive design. So, Ellie, take it away.
Thanks, Bruce. So we have Sarah Bruni. Is it Brune or Bruni, Sarah?
It's Bruni.
Bruni, who talked to us last year about this design competition. So she and Greg Tamburino, who is the winning architect, are going to talk about the process that they went through for this competition and the results. So, Sarah.
Great. Thank you, Ellie, and thank you, Bruce, for having us on. Doing it again 1 year later when we actually have done the competition, it all came to fruition and happened. It's really exciting. What I want to share with all of you today is how we went about this project. We wanted to solve for the issue we're seeing in Chicago, and I think this is something that's happening around the country, where there's really a lack of new construction homes that are affordable to even the middle income buyer. And in Chicago, we have tens of thousands of vacant lots in our city limits. So this was another way to sort of create a strategy to use those vacant lots and create a product that could be replicated across the city. We engaged a lot of partners for this project, and I'll talk about some of the key reasons I think that we were successful in actually pulling it off. Even though we didn't have a lot of the expertise in-house, we really engaged a lot of people who I think were critical to its success. And I'll tell you some of the lessons that we learned along the way. So, here we go. Like I said, the problem we were trying to solve for was the rising cost of construction and the lack of starter homes being built or new construction homes that were really affordable to the average 100% AMI buyer in our area. And our goal was to create something that was really attractive to today's buyers, something that was kind of iconic and would be replicated across the city, similar to other designs we've had in Chicago, such as the bungalow or the Greystone. I think every city has these kind of iconic designs. So we asked our architects. We decided to hold a design competition for architects to submit their ideas to kind of solve for these issues. Obviously, design is only one part of the cost of construction, but when you engage in smart design, you can really help mitigate some of the redundancies and issues that we see in a lot of the new construction homes that are much more expensive. So we asked architects to provide a design that was flexible and respected the current architecture in Chicago neighborhoods. We also asked them to incorporate a wealth building component, like a live workspace or a second income unit. And we also asked them to keep in mind accessibility and options for aging in place. And this was really important. I think one benefit of new construction is that you can take into account all of these modern ideas that we really embrace much more today than we did, 100 years ago when a lot of the Chicago housing stock was being built. So we really asked them to take all these things into consideration. And we were looking for a single family home that would sell for $250,000 or a 2-flat for $350,000, which is which is affordable to the average buyer, which I'm sure to some of you is ridiculous, but that is the market that we're in. Okay, waiting for my slide to change. So our process started about a year ago. We asked architects from across the country, and we actually got national submissions as well, to submit their designs. We also had a jury that I will talk about in my next slide, and they chose 3 finalists. We had over 130 entries from across the world. So we had our jury narrow it down to 3. Then those 3 finalists got a stipend that we had fundraised for to come to a set of community meetings. We had 5 community meetings, which we'll get into a little bit later in the presentation. They were very interesting and I think a really integral part of the process because we consider ourselves a neighborhood organization. We had the finalists revise their plans based on feedback from the community as well as the city of Chicago. And we got more feedback on those revised designs. And then we had 1 finalist chosen, and that's Greg. And he's with us today. He's going to share a little bit about his experience. So one key factor of success in this project was us engaging partners from across the city that span really different industries and bring different assets to the table. So you can see on the bottom, that row of organizations are all the people who are kind of involved in the planning. And then we were also able to raise some funds from Freddie Mac, Hoke Brothers Foundation, Ocwen, and Related. Related Midwest is a huge developer here. So they've been a really key partner and they continue to be. The AIA Chicago you see at the bottom, that's the American Institute for Architects, and having them as a partner was critical because they run design competitions as part of their everyday job. So I think that is really key. If you're trying to take on sort of a different innovative project, make sure you bring people in who have done it before and learn from them. This was our jury. It was really important to us to have a jury from a diverse set of backgrounds who brought different skills and assets to the discussion. If you do put on your own design competition, picking the jury is really important. I think myself as a project manager, oftentimes I look at kind of organizing projects as a to-do list, and one of them is find jury members. But what you really have to remember is these are the people who are going to pick the winner, and you don't get to pick the winner as the organizer. So it was really important that these people have the same values that we have values that understand the need to listen to community members and community input. And I think we got really lucky. It was also great to have the commissioner of the Department of Buildings with us just to help bring a practical edge to the discussions. And having Related Midwest in the room was also key because they really understood how these things were going to get built or what some of the challenges might be. Now I will invite Greg to kind of talk about his experience as someone who entered the competition and the process that they had to go through as architects.
Hello, everyone. This is Greg Tamburino. Honored to be speaking to you as the finalist for the Disruptive Design Competition. Thank you for having me on the call. I always appreciate the opportunity to speak about the competition and the goals of the competition. Thank you, Sarah, for the overview of the competition process. About me, I'm currently a practicing architect in Chicago. And although I entered the competition independently, I've been practicing here with the global architecture firm Perkins & Will for the last 14 years. So it's been a long journey to get to the point where we're at in the competition. And the fact is we're only part way to the goal of ultimately building the prototype affordable homes with really a lot of work ahead. The experience of working closely with NHS, with Sarah, who organized the competition and continues to manage the next phase of developing and ultimately realizing the project, I can say has been very good from the start. It's been an incredible team. We have a very good team of passionate people, as Sarah mentioned, including Related Midwest, who is acting as really the developer for the prototype homes. And we all bring our sort of unique perspectives and expertise as the design continues to evolve and refine. And I really have confidence that the end result will remain true to the goals that were initially set forth. So I'd like to talk next a little bit about the design process from my perspective as a competitor. And for me, it started actually right around this time a year ago, December 2018, when I stumbled upon the call for entries on the, I think it was on the AIA website. In fact, the competition had already started a few weeks earlier, and I was behind from the start. But when I read the brief, and it was very well written and very specific, there was something about it that spoke so directly to the things that are important to me and interesting to me, and that I'm just passionate about, that I really never gave it a second thought. I committed myself to putting together an entry and just immediately started sketching out my ideas. And the way the competition was set up was in 3 phases. So phase 1 was a good idea, Sarah. It was a good hook because the bar of entry was very reasonable. It was a simple 111 by 17 inch color rendering that you can see on the screen, a written description, and then some breakdown of cost and a narrative for your design solution. Now, I think I tricked myself into thinking that would be simple because I ended up spending about an enormous amount of time preparing this entry over the next couple of months, but it was all ultimately worth it. I think you go to the next slide, Sarah. So between December and March, we worked on our entry, submitted it, and the jury deliberated, and 3 finalists were announced. And I think it was several days later than when I originally anticipated them to be announced. So at that time, I had already looked through many of the entries. They were all
It was the polar vortex. That's why, Greg. Polar vortex.
It was Chicago winter that delayed the announcement. Well, I had concluded at that point that I did not win because pouring through all the entries, there were so many amazing and well thought out designs. But luckily, the next day I did get that call from the AIA congratulating me, and I was, of course, overwhelmingly happy and ready to start on phase 2 of the competition. So what you see here on the screen are the 3 finalists' presentation boards, my own on the left, which I titled Adaptable House. Maybe go to the next slide. And I entitled it Adaptable House. I'm sorry, I thought there was a enlarged image. This is okay. I titled it Adaptable House as the core concept to my design solution was to allow as much adaptability as possible while maintaining a really compact and efficient building enclosure. I'll jump ahead. Phase 2, so there was 3 phases. Phase 2 of the project included a couple rounds of community meetings where we gave these short presentations to at the community meetings and received feedback from the vested people in the neighborhood. To put it lightly, there were some very strong opinions on things, but they were really all positive feedback. Whether there should be a basement or not was a contentious issue. What materials should be on the outside, what the exterior should look like, how many windows were not enough, too many, and so on and so on. But the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. It was a great experience, and it gave us reassurance really that we were on the right track and working so diligently on what was being appreciated, and a welcomed opportunity to sort of give back to the city in a way that supports and invests in communities and neighborhoods that not only need it most, but have historically been overlooked when it comes to investment by the private sector. At this point in the competition too, we were given 2 actual sites, 2 property addresses to design for, and one was in a neighborhood, West Humboldt Park, and the other Chicago neighborhood, Bronzeville. And you can see a picture of that at the top. I think that's the West Humboldt Park site and community meeting. So at this point, we had actual sites. We made site visits to get a better understanding of what the existing context looked like, what sort of housing was already in the neighborhood, any limitations that might affect our designs. And phase 2 was much more involved than phase 1. Next slide. So there's in this phase, there was a lot more refinement to what was previously considered a conceptual design. We were required to produce 3 large presentation boards that included much more information about the home's layout and materials used on the exterior. We showed how the unit would be fully accessible to someone with a handicap. We talked about our strategy to come in under the stated maximum construction costs, and that might have been one of the most difficult challenges. We were given 2 opportunities, an opportunity to build either a single family home for $250,000 or a 2-flat for $300,000. Now there were some soft costs that were on top of that, but that was sort of our limit on hard costs for construction. Faced with that, at this point in the process is when I made the decision that I would design for the 2-flat scheme. I was sort of unconvinced that I could maintain the original design goals I had for the single family house and keep it on budget, but to maintain my concept of like ultimate flexibility for the end user, I composed the interior layout in a way that allowed the initial buyer to have the option to rent out either the upper or lower floor as an apartment while they lived in the other flat. And then over time, if their family size or needs outgrew the space, they could relatively easily convert the 2-flat into a single family home in the future. So ultimately, I submitted both designs, one for each neighborhood, with the description and goal that the 2-flat and the single family solution maintained flexibility between the 2. The outside of the building was the same, regardless of how you laid out the interior. And just some images here from our community meetings. Okay, next, please. So this was one of the other finalists. His name's Joel Huffman, also from Chicago, and he titled his project GreenFlex 600, which was based on the concept of 600 square foot building blocks that can be stacked one on top of another vertically, between 1 and 3 stories tall. And the idea there is that it would suit a variety of needs. Or just due to the small footprint of each 600 block, multiple structures. The idea is that multiple structures could be put on the same lot where a homeowner could rent the companion home for additional income. So I thought that was sort of a really unique and smart solution. Next. This was the other finalist. This team is Georgy Todorov and Petya Petrova team, and their main concept was efficient modular construction, and it utilized mass wood timber structure and was very focused on sustainability. And as you can see, all the solutions have a very sort of compact, efficient use of as possible of space. So to me, the finalists on the surface had 3 very different solutions to the design problem. But I think for me, over the course of several weeks working together and going to the community meetings together and talking, we started to discover that there were actually many similarities in the way we approached the project, which I found particularly interesting. Okay, next. And then this is my entry, actually one of 3 boards, but I think this summarizes it pretty well. I'm showing a series of the homes in a row. One of the lots that we were designing for, actually there were 2 lots side by side. I just showed what it might be like if we filled all the vacant lots on this particular block with the same house. And they could have different window layouts, they could have different materials, they could be somewhat customized to the end user's needs. But to me, it was important that they read as a residence. They have a peaked roof, they blend in with the neighborhood. There's nothing about this that says I'm an affordable house. It's just a house that belongs in the neighborhood. So a couple other things that I incorporated was a very open and inviting front. So open by like a visual connection to the street, highly transparent living spaces that activate the street, this large, almost exaggerated porch that this is where you make your connections with the neighborhood, right? So the strong connectivity to the community. I elevated the ground floor a little bit, so there's a series of gentle ramps that bring you to the first floor. The ramps are wheelchair accessible, that raising that first floor gives it just a little more presence on the street, the ground floor being fully accessible. And then a series of, I don't like the word barriers, but layers that give you a sense of security at the same time. So this low and transparent fence that isn't off-putting, but offers a feeling of security to the house, and then landscaping that furthers that feeling of security. It doesn't look like a traditional barrier. So utilizing some natural elements to both give you a sense of place and security from the street, but at the same time really connecting you to your community. And then in the bottom right, you can kind of get a sense of the stair that brings you up to the upper level. And then the idea is that there's 2 entries. You can kind of see it in the rendering. One entry that brings you directly into the living space of the ground floor, and then the other entry takes you up the stairs to, by walling off that landing at the ground floor, now you have 2 independent apartments. And back to my whole idea of flexibility, gives you the opportunity to have rental income or adapt that house in a number of different ways to be a single family house. And that's it.
Great. And I think, Greg, you identified the highlights of the design, but I think a few things that we've learned as we've gone through the pre-development process for this home is that the way to kind of make this a more affordable product than what's on the market right now is really value engineering the design to make the best possible use of space. And we spent months sort of re-engineering the design to do that. I'm really happy that it's fully accessible, allows for aging in place. There's a bedroom and full bath on the first floor. And I think it speaks a little bit to some trends in the market for young buyers and millennials, because you have this income supporting component with either the 2-unit where you can live in one and rent out the other, or as a single family version, it's a 3-bed, 3-bath home, which allows for some co-living situations if the buyer desires that. And just a couple lessons that we've learned from the project. I think we really stuck to a very specific need, a specific gap that we saw in housing in the private market, and we wanted to create a solution that would fill that gap. This is not a solution for very low income housing. This is not a homelessness solution. This is not a rental solution. This is very much solving for one issue, and I think that allowed us to go very deep into this issue and learn a lot. Also, as I mentioned at the beginning, engaging the relevant partners was really key. It wouldn't have been possible without that coalition that was built. We have received a ton of attention for this. I mean, everyone involved has really received a ton of attention for the project. So I think it's really important to have some marketing component built in. I think as nonprofits, we don't want to spend money on that type of thing because it feels superfluous, but we used our in-house marketing person, and AIA used their expertise as well, and we were able to really have a national reach with our message. And even though this was a labor of love and we received no funding actually to ourselves to do this. Just the attention we've been able to bring to this issue and the way that it's sort of helped us be a leader on this topic has definitely made the project worth it, in addition to, you know, the philanthropic purpose. And the last thing I want to address is, you know, we raised a lot of money for prizes for the architects because, as Greg mentioned, they put in a ton of time. We had them go to 5 community meetings. We asked them to develop multiple designs and they spent just a ton of time with us as well as on their own. So I think providing some kind of prize money is helpful, but not absolutely necessary. It just depends kind of how far you want to take the competition. But I think you should adjust your time expectations to kind of the funds that you're able to provide. So I'd be happy to take questions now. I'm not sure how we do that.
Thanks.
Well,
oops, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say there was one participant that wanted you to go back to the slide that showed all 3 of the homes.
Yeah, can do that, I think.
Oh, forgive me. I took away your controls. All right, you have it back?
Okay, great. As I do that, any questions?
Sarah, I'll be managing the Q&A portion.
Okay. So this is, I think, the only one that shows them all together, but do note that this is their phase 1 submission. So Greg's design on the left, for example, changed quite a bit, but you can see it's the same idea.
Okay, I'm just going to take the mouse very quickly. That was answered. Are any of these homes solar powered?
There is the opportunity to add solar panels. We are looking at making the home all electric, just because that creates some efficiency for the long-term maintenance of the home. But we've run into a little bit of an issue with that because I think people really still expect a gas range. So we're debating right now whether we're going to do it all electric. But for the price point, adding the solar panel on at the beginning is probably not realistic. But they're available to be put on at some point if the buyer is able to do that.
Right, it'll be engineered structurally to be able to handle the additional load of a solar panel. It'll be solar panel ready, but like Sarah pointed out, it just at this point, it's still on the table, but at this point, we're having a hard time working up the cost effectiveness of it.
I just wanted to comment that I find it really interesting and encouraging that you chose to include a pretty good sized front porch to kind of create that neighborhood feel. Because I know like in the neighborhood that I live in, all of the porches are at the same exact spot in the front yard. So actually you can see down through the entire street going both ways. So it kind of lends to that, waving to your neighbor kind of feel.
Absolutely.
Question, what are some of the materials that were used on the exterior?
The materials aren't necessarily locked in place yet. Now, we do want them, well, for one, we want to offer multiple options so that if you have a row of these built, they don't necessarily all have to look exactly the same, and you can tune it to the desires of the end user. But they should all be, for one, durable, low maintenance, and often durable and low maintenance is hard to be cost effective, but I think those are definitely priorities. So things that don't require a lot of upkeep and that are going to keep the inside protected and thermally insulated at the same time is a key component of it. So we're looking at stucco, so sort of the new technologies of stucco that that don't have some of the issues that sort of the older traditional stuccos have, or even metal panel siding is being explored. And then there's a cement board that looks a lot like traditional wood siding, and it's painted. And from the street, you wouldn't be able to tell if it's cement board or wood siding, but it's very durable and fireproof, and a lot of things going for it, and relatively cost effective as well. So that's kind of the palette of materials to choose from.
Let me see. Are there any suggestions for undertaking a similar type of competition for another market, specifically a depressed market with very low assessment values?
So we ran into that issue. I mean, it's all about the lot that you choose, I think, in that situation. In our West Side neighborhood that we're building in, the market is not quite there. I mean, this would be a leader. This will be a leader in the market. So we're choosing there a more stable block where we can be infill versus the site we had originally chosen was sort of, as Greg had mentioned, it was a row of vacant lots across from a school. It's a great site, but you'd really need to build 4 at a time to sort of create your own comps to make it work. But it's, yeah, I mean, that's a challenge. I think if you can find a subsidy or appraisal gap funding, you know, that addresses that, but that's absolutely a challenge. We're just trying to do infill. We're being so strategic about the lot that we pick so that we can try to get it to appraise out.
Thank you. Is the framing prefab or not?
You know, we looked at it both ways, and related, the developer has a lot of depth and expertise and history and construction of large projects and small. So they're working more directly with contractors and getting quotes and their expert opinions on how to build this. In my mind, there's a lot of benefits to doing it prefab. You have the controlled setting of building it in a factory. You get a lot more precision, a lot more economy. Now, that's often the case when you're building several of these. So as the prototypes, when we build the first 2 to demonstrate how it can be done, they might end up being just conventional stick-built construction. So on-site, using sort of workforce from the community as much as possible to build it a conventional way, which is a little bit slower and less efficient than prefabbing. But again, it's really the scale of it that needs to be larger to take advantage of prefab.
And in Chicago, we have a bit of a unique issue with that because our building code is very complicated. You would have to use a local warehouse, you know, a local plant that's making the modular framing. Otherwise, you'd have to pay a building inspector to go to another state, and that's very expensive. And the only places we have here that are doing that are union. And so you're paying the union prices. So the price savings that are possible are kind of wiped out on a single family because of that.
Thanks. What are some of the comments that the community provided?
There were a lot. I mean, as Greg said in the presentation, they had a lot of questions about the materials and the maintenance of the home and what was going to be used in the home to make it easier and cheaper to maintain. They had a lot of questions. You can see, for example, on the urban cabin on the right here, you know, they have that door. It looks very cool. They have that door that goes straight out into the street, and people sort of said that's absolutely not going to fly. So I think they helped bridge the gap that sometimes exists between architecture and design and sort of the real desires of the buyer. And so we essentially had, you know, rooms full of hundreds of potential buyers. So they looked at it as is this a house I would want to buy? So they said the same types of things you would if you were walking through a potential home.
Thanks. That's it for questions.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent, very exciting. I think this is we'll post this onto our on our list of calls, and people will be able to refer back to this as one of the things we call innovations in housing counseling program. But this is very helpful, and we appreciate the good work you're doing.
Thanks.
Thank
Cool.
you very much.
Thanks again. So anyways, we're still doing pictures worth 1,000 words. This is a good one. If you'd like to get your organization promoted a little bit and help build a stockpile of great pictures showing our work and what we accomplish, we'd love to get submissions. Send them to Ellie. She's putting them up onto the Facebook page and using them for marketing opportunities. So thank you for that help. Please consider, if you haven't joined NHRC, to join. We still have the discount on the credit reports. Price is going to go up a little bit next year, but not a lot, and still be cheaper than other alternatives. We're looking at, and also, I probably don't promote this enough, but members get emails from me about unusual funding opportunities they might not have seen, and sometimes ones that are very, very big and some that are very small. But the idea is that there are opportunities that we come across and want to share with the membership, and occasionally media opportunities. So there was a documentary made where several groups ended up being in the documentary, and I think this year we had the Wall Street Journal, and forgetting a couple other media outlets that housing counseling groups were featured in. So you know, the real reason to join us is to support the work we're doing and trying to keep housing counseling in the front and center of both policy issues and trying to increase in the public eye. And we'll do a lot more next year. So we're you know, your membership goes to contribute that, and it gives us the flexibility to lobby and to do things that are maybe outside of the mainstream of funding opportunities. So thanks for that. Appreciate everybody's joining. We've had a rush at the end of the year of memberships. We like that. We're just a couple $1,000s behind goal here. So for the end of the year, we're actually $3,000 behind. So if you wanted to join for the first time and get that in before the end of the year, that would really be appreciated. So we haven't decided whether we're going to have another call this month, so we haven't scheduled it yet. We will plan on, if we will make an announcement certainly by the Monday before the 19th. But if you don't hear anything, we'll be back in January full force. We've got some really good things up our sleeve. But we want to make sure that when we're presenting, we have high quality programming available. So with that, if I don't talk to you between now and then, have a great holiday and charge into the new year. There's plenty we've got to do. Thanks a lot.